Welcome to HOA Karen Expose. Like, comment your story, and subscribe for daily neighborhood drama. You won't believe what happened when a nosy HOA Karen tried to get a dog taken away, only to end up in trouble with the law herself. It all started on a quiet suburban street where most people just want peace, privacy, and friendly neighbors. But not everyone is like that. Some people seem to think they're the boss of the block. They nitpick. They report things. They complain, not because there's a real problem, but because they like the power. That's exactly what happened here. A woman from the local homeowners association, let's just call her Karen, saw a dog in someone's yard. Now, this wasn't just any dog. This dog was big, alert, clearly trained. But instead of minding her own business, Karen decided something was wrong. Maybe she thought the dog looked too aggressive, or out of place. Or maybe she just didn't like the owner. Whatever it was, she jumped to conclusions. No questions asked. No conversation. She called animal control and filed a complaint. She claimed the dog was dangerous. That it was barking too much. That it looked neglected. She described the dog as a threat to the neighborhood. And the kicker. She said the owner was breaking HOA rules by keeping a vicious dog on the property. That's when the drama really began. Karen probably thought she just made a quick phone call and that the authorities would show up, take the dog away, and thank her for being such a concerned citizen. But she had no idea what she was walking into. Because the truth is, this dog wasn't some backyard barker or untrained mutt. This dog was part of the sheriff's department's K9 training program. The owner, a respected volunteer who fosters and trains dogs for law enforcement. These dogs aren't just obedient, they're trained to serve, protect, and respond to danger. And the person taking care of them goes through rigorous checks and supervision. Every dog they foster is treated with care, discipline, and respect. So when animal control got that call, they had to follow protocol. They visited the property, expecting to maybe see a mistreated animal or a dangerous situation. What they found instead was a clean yard, a calm and focused dog, and an owner who knew exactly what they were doing. The dog had paperwork, credentials, health records, training logs, all neatly documented. Everything was up to code, not just HOA rules, but also county regulations, sheriff department protocols, and animal welfare standards. The animal control officers quickly realized something didn't add up. The dog wasn't a threat. It was a working animal in training. And the owner wasn't some careless neighbor. They were doing important work for public safety. At this point, the situation could have ended quietly. But it didn't. Because Karen didn't back down. Even when the officers explained what was going on, she kept pushing. She argued. She raised her voice. She insisted that dangerous dogs have no place in family neighborhoods. She even tried to involve other members of the HOA to get the dog removed. That's when things took a sharp turn. Because filing a false report, especially about something as serious as a dangerous animal, isn't just annoying. It's illegal. Authorities started looking into Karen's report. They found that she had exaggerated. She made claims without evidence. And when asked for details, her story didn't hold up. This wasn't her first time, either. Turns out, Karen had a history of filing complaints. Some were about loud kids. Others about lawn decorations. But now, she'd gone too far. She had reported a law enforcement dog as dangerous, without reason, and interfered with an active public safety program. And interfering with law enforcement, even indirectly, is something the county doesn't take lightly. The situation spiraled quickly. The sheriff's department was notified. Karen was questioned. And when the officers dug deeper, they found even more problems. She had made threats. She had tried to intimidate the dog owner. She even posted about it in a local Facebook group, spreading lies and trying to rally support. But the internet doesn't forget. Screenshots were saved. Comments were reported. And suddenly, Karen found herself not as the neighborhood hero, but as the person under investigation. And while all of this was going on, the dog, the very one she tried to get rid of, remained calm, focused, ready to serve. Because that's what trained canines do. They ignore distractions. They stay alert. They don't bark back. But humans, well, we're a little more reactive. Especially when injustice is in the air. The neighborhood itself was the kind of place where people wave to each other, mow their lawns on Saturdays, and walk their dogs in the evening. It wasn't a bad place to live, not at all. But like many neighborhoods with homeowners associations, it had its share of rules, and people who liked to enforce them a little too enthusiastically. The dog in question wasn't just lounging in the yard or barking at cars all day. He was a working dog. A Belgian Malinois, smart and sharp-eyed, always alert. If you've never seen one, picture a lean, muscular dog with the intensity of a soldier. This wasn't a house pet. He was a trainee, part of the sheriff's department's K9 foster program. These dogs don't just fetch tennis balls. They're trained to sniff out narcotics, search for missing persons, and help in high-risk law enforcement situations. And the person fostering him? A calm, soft-spoken man who had been volunteering with the sheriff's K9 unit for years. He wasn't the loud, confrontational type. He kept to himself, followed the rules, and treated the dog with respect and structure. Every morning started with a strict routine: leash up, training drills, scent work, obstacle courses. Everything was done by the book. He even spoke to a few neighbors early on, letting them know about the dog. Just as a heads up, in case anyone had questions or concerns. Most people appreciated it. A few were even impressed, especially the kids who thought it was cool that a real police dog lived just down the street. But not Karen. From the beginning, she wasn't pleased. Maybe it was the size of the dog. Or maybe it was just that she didn't like not being asked for permission. She started watching from her window, making notes. Once, she even came over uninvited, asking personal questions about the dog. What kind of training it had, how often it was outside, whether it had bitten anyone yet. It wasn't friendly curiosity. It felt more like an interrogation. The man answered politely, but he could sense her tone. She wasn't interested in learning. She was looking for something to report. Still, nothing seemed out of place. The yard was secure. The dog wasn't aggressive. He barely barked, unless someone walked too close to the property. And even then, just once or twice, then silence. The kind of alertness you'd expect from a dog trained for law enforcement. But Karen didn't see a well-trained working dog. She saw a problem. A violation. Something she could fix. And when people like her think they're fixing something, they don't stop at a simple conversation. They escalate. So she called animal control. Made it sound urgent. Said the dog was a threat. That it was roaming unleashed, even though it never left the yard. She used buzzwords like aggressive breed and unsafe for children. She knew exactly what buttons to press to get attention. It didn't matter that none of it was true. What she didn't realize was that everything about this dog and its care was already logged, documented, and approved, not just by the HOA but by the sheriff's department itself. There were permits, certifications, even weekly check-ins. This wasn't some backyard pet. It was a badge-carrying officer in training. Still, Karen didn't care. She thought she knew better. And she thought she could bend the rules to her will. What she didn't know was how deep the consequences could go once she tried to interfere with law enforcement operations, even indirectly. And this was only the beginning. The call to animal control didn't take long to spark action. When someone reports a potentially dangerous animal, especially in a family neighborhood, officials are required to respond quickly. And thanks to Karen's dramatic phrasing, words like threatening, hostile, and uncontrolled, they treated the call seriously. 2 officers pulled up in an unmarked car the very next afternoon. They didn't come in aggressively. They were calm, professional. But you could tell they were prepared for trouble. Clipboard in hand, one officer knocked while the other stood back, eyes on the yard, watching the dog. And the dog. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He simply stood still, alert but calm, exactly as he was trained to do. No aggression. No anxiety. Just observation. That's how these dogs are taught to behave, even in unexpected situations. The foster owner stepped outside and greeted the officers without hesitation. He wasn't confused. He wasn't angry. He was used to scrutiny. This wasn't his first dog, and he knew how fast things could spiral when people didn't understand working dogs. But this time, something felt different. The officers explained they had received a complaint about a possibly dangerous dog. The owner nodded, asked calmly who had called, but they wouldn't say. Standard protocol. Then, he invited them to see everything for themselves. The yard. The training setup. The shaded water station. Even the dog's ID tag and microchip records. He showed the officers a file folder he kept near the door, copies of certifications, vet visits, and letters from the sheriff's K-9 unit. Everything was in order. Perfectly organized. No red flags. No violations. Just solid proof that this dog wasn't a threat. It was part of a program serving the community. The officers took their time. They walked around the yard. They watched the dog move on command. One of them even commented on how well trained it was. The visit could have ended right there. No issue. No follow-up. Just a misunderstanding, cleared up in minutes. But it didn't end. Karen had been watching from across the street. The moment she saw animal control arrive, she walked over. Fast. Like she couldn't wait to insert herself into the situation. Without being asked, she started talking. Loudly. Accusingly. She pointed at the dog. Said it lunged at her last week. Claimed she saw it off-leash and chasing birds aggressively. Her words were sharp, panicked, but they didn't match what the officers were seeing. The dog didn't move. It stayed exactly where it had been told to sit. Calm. Controlled. Not even a bark. One of the officers gently interrupted her, asking if she had any photos or video of what she was describing. She didn't. Another asked if she had ever filed a police report. She hadn't. Karen grew defensive. She turned on the owner, saying things like, "You don't belong here with that kind of animal," and "This is a family street, not a police training ground." The officers tried to de-escalate. They reminded her that fostering for the sheriff's department is not only legal, it's protected. They mentioned that everything they'd seen showed no threat at all. But Karen didn't care. Her voice got louder. Her claims got more extreme. And then she made a mistake. She said she had already emailed the HOA board asking for the dog and its owner to be removed from the neighborhood. Not warned. Removed. Kicked out. That's when one of the officers quietly stepped aside and made a call. Because now, it wasn't just about a dog. It wasn't just a false complaint. This was starting to sound like harassment. And if the foster program was being threatened or interfered with, that crossed a line. The moment the call was made, everything shifted. Karen was asked to step aside while the officers confirmed a few details. She tried to argue, but they didn't engage. The foster owner stood quietly, saying nothing. Not a word of anger. Just patience. Confidence. Because he knew this wasn't going the way Karen had planned. Within minutes, another vehicle pulled up. This time, it wasn't animal control. It was a deputy from the sheriff's office. Not in a rush. No sirens. Just calm and serious. He stepped out, gave a quick nod to the animal control officers, and walked over to the foster owner like they already knew each other. Karen's face changed. She went quiet for the first time all afternoon. Maybe she thought she was in charge of the situation. Maybe she believed her call would be enough to get the dog taken away. But now, the sheriff's department was involved, and she didn't expect that. The deputy greeted the dog like he recognized it. A pat on the head. A simple command. The dog followed instantly. It was clear, This wasn't some pet. This was part of the force. Karen asked what was going on, still trying to hold her ground. The deputy politely, but firmly, told her they were conducting an official follow-up. She wasn't involved and needed to step away. But Karen didn't listen. She kept going. Complaining. Demanding answers. That's when the deputy turned to her and asked a simple question. "Ma'am, are you aware this dog is currently under active K9 training with the sheriff's unit?" Karen paused. Then scoffed. "That's what he says," she snapped, pointing to the foster owner. "But how do we even know that's true? Anyone can say anything." The deputy didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just pulled out a folder from his bag. Inside, copies of the foster agreement, program ID, and handler certification, all with official county letterhead. Stamped. Signed. Dated. He handed it to the animal control officers, who reviewed it carefully. After a few moments, they nodded. That was it. Official. Verified. There was no question now. This wasn't a private pet. This was a trained service dog under government supervision. Karen looked stunned. You could see the moment it hit her, that everything she'd said, everything she'd assumed, had just collapsed in front of her. The deputy wasn't done. He turned to Karen again and asked whether she had any direct evidence of danger or mistreatment. Not rumors. Not guesses. Real proof. She didn't. All she had were feelings and assumptions. And those don't hold up when you're making accusations about law enforcement animals. The animal control officers closed their folders. There was no violation. No threat. No reason for further action. In fact, they wrote a note clearing the dog and its foster home of any wrongdoing. Completely clean record. Again. And still, Karen wouldn't let it go. She said the program should be somewhere else. That it wasn't fair to the community. That her kids were afraid, even though her kids were never seen near the property. She tried to flip the story. But it was too late. The deputy turned to the foster owner and calmly said, "Thanks again for your continued service. Let us know if this happens again." That was when Karen lost the last bit of control she thought she had. She demanded to know why no one was listening to her. Why she was being dismissed. And that's when the deputy said something that shut everything down. "Ma'am, you didn't just file a complaint. You submitted a false report about a government asset. That's not just a neighborhood issue. That's a legal one." Karen went silent. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Because now, it wasn't about HOA preferences. It wasn't about barking dogs or feelings of discomfort. This was about interfering with an active law enforcement program. And suddenly, she wasn't the one asking questions anymore. She was the one being investigated. Karen didn't expect to be the one in trouble. Not even close. She thought she'd made a helpful call. That the system would reward her for looking out for the neighborhood. But the moment the deputy mentioned the possibility of a legal issue, her entire demeanor shifted. She wasn't shouting anymore. Her voice got quieter. Defensive. She said she was just trying to keep the community safe. That she didn't know the dog was special. That maybe she'd misunderstood. But it was too late for backpedaling. Because intent doesn't erase consequences. And when you file a false report, especially involving a working K9, you're not just being a nuisance. You're interfering with official duties. The deputy asked her again if she had evidence. Emails, photos, video, anything at all to back up her claims. She admitted she didn't. Not because she forgot, but because nothing ever actually happened. She made it up, or at the very least, exaggerated what little she saw to make it sound serious. So the officers wrote it down. False claim. No supporting evidence. Harassment toward a certified law enforcement volunteer. That report didn't just sit in a folder. It was submitted to the sheriff's department for review. Karen was warned on the spot. Continuing this kind of behavior could result in charges. She looked stunned. She asked if she was going to be arrested. The deputy didn't answer right away. He said that, for now, they were treating it as a formal warning, but depending on what turned up in the rest of the investigation, that could change. And just like that, Karen, the same woman who strutted over like she was saving the neighborhood, was now nervously stepping back toward her house, eyes down, not saying another word. But it didn't end there. Word got around the neighborhood fast. A few people had seen the patrol car. Others had already heard parts of the story through the local community Facebook group, where, by the way, Karen had been posting angry rants about the dangerous dog for weeks. Screenshots of those posts started circulating. Neighbors began to piece things together. Some who had stayed quiet before now spoke up, sharing their own stories of Karen's constant complaints. One woman said Karen called the city over a patio umbrella being the wrong color. Another said she was threatened with a fine for letting her kids draw chalk art on the sidewalk. Turns out, this wasn't just a one-time thing. This was a pattern. And the HOA board noticed. Within days, Karen was called into a formal meeting with the HOA leadership. Not to discuss the dog, but to answer for her behavior. False reports, public harassment, misuse of community channels. It wasn't a criminal trial, but it was serious. She was officially reprimanded. Some residents even started a petition to have her removed from the HOA board. Meanwhile, the foster owner kept going with his routine. Early morning training. Weekend check-ins. The dog continued to progress through its program, unbothered, undistracted, exactly as it was taught. There was even a moment, just a week later, where neighbors who once kept their distance came by to say thanks. One family dropped off homemade treats and a note that said, "Thanks for serving our community, both of you." Another neighbor offered to help build a shade structure for the training area. In the end, the community rallied, not around Karen's complaints, but around the quiet strength of someone just trying to do good work. And the irony? The very dog Karen wanted gone was now more respected than she was. Karen wasn't seen much after that. No more walks up and down the sidewalk with her phone out, pretending to check for violations. No more surprise knocks on neighbors' doors about fence height or trash bins being out too early. She kept to herself. Quiet. Careful. Some people said she was embarrassed. Others guessed the sheriff's office had followed up more seriously behind the scenes. Either way, she stopped trying to control everything, and everyone, around her. The HOA board, once dominated by her constant complaints, began shifting too. More members started pushing for balance, fairness instead of fear. One even suggested a neighborhood appreciation day to support the K9 foster program and educate people about working dogs. It wasn't a dramatic change overnight, but it was something. As for the foster owner, he didn't change much. Still kept a low profile. Still stuck to his routine. But something was different now. More neighbors waved when he walked by. A few even stopped to ask about the dog's training or how they could help the program. One man, who had never said more than a word or two before, offered to donate supplies after learning how much volunteers paid out of pocket. The dog graduated its training 6 weeks later, passed all the tests, got its badge, transferred to an active unit in a nearby county. The foster owner said goodbye with a smile and a proud handshake from the deputy who returned to pick him up. It wasn't a sad moment. It was a success. That dog would go on to track missing persons, help with search and rescue, maybe even save lives. And it all started in a quiet suburban yard, where someone just tried to help in the background. But not long after, a new dog arrived. Younger. Just beginning its training. Same routine. New partner. Same quiet mission. And this time, no complaints. Because the neighborhood had seen what happened when someone tried to tear down something they didn't understand. And they also saw what it looked like when someone stood firm, followed the rules, and let the truth speak for itself. That truth didn't need shouting. It didn't need revenge. Just patience, proof, and a bit of backbone. And now, Karen keeps her blinds shut. The new foster dog barks once in a while, But nobody complains. They know better now.